I'm John Miglosh for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Well, it looks like we got this thing licked. You heard it here first, folks. I was going to bring up the video from Laura Ingraham with the doctor in New York who's treated hundreds of patients and says didn't have to put any of them on ventilators. The ventilators are a red herring. We didn't need the ventilators if we would have got the malaria drugs going. And apparently we're going to have 50 million. One company said they're producing 50 million doses. And we got 8 million from Israel. We got enough to get everybody that's in the hospital with this thing doing better. It costs $20 per patient for 5 days. It's what, $4 per day. So let's build ventilators for 10, 20,000 apiece instead. Right. That makes sense. Anyway, let's get our government shutting down the shutdown. That's what we need to go. So today we want to talk a couple of things. First, we got some positive news. Definitely positive news. U.S. commerce sales, e-commerce sales rise 25%. I heard from one of my clients last night, and they said not only are the obvious things selling, but people are buying a lot of stuff, different stuff. Keep your doors open if you're in e-commerce right now. And, of course, we're all wondering if it's going to last. It probably won't too much, but if you could have a big infusion of new customers, who wouldn't want that? So there's some good news out there, but literally we're holding this together. We're holding the economy together. It's not broken yet, but we need to get back to work. And I'm a little concerned that we have governors shutting down states based on projection models. Now, I know, you know what you say, John, you're a philosopher, you're not an economist, you're not, I'm not a lot of things, but I started using computers in marketing before anyone, and I mean anyone. I did a presentation for the Direct Marketing Association in New York City, the downtown Hilton, the big annual show, and the room was packed, standing room only. I asked for a show of hands how many people had a computer in their marketing department. 2 hands went up. 2 hands. I said, well, this was supposed to be a round table. I guess I'm going to talk about how to use computers in marketing. And that was how we started. And that had to be about 1982 or something. And then people said, well, we understand what you're talking about, but we don't understand our IT department. I had Daytimer's IT director flew in one time, and he said, the marketing people, we don't let them run queries from like September through February because they slow everything down. They don't know how to write a query, and they're accessing data across the whole mainframe. I said, yeah, I know. They're asking questions on trending, and so they want to scan everything. They want the whole history. He said, I know, and it shuts the whole order processing down. I said, I know. He said, but we've got it figured out. I said, what? He said, well, instead of letting them run queries, we're going to give them a programmer. We're going to have a programmer in the marketing department. Sound familiar? They said, now the data scientists are getting hired by marketing departments. It's not going to fix it. But anyway, I said to him, looked him straight in the eye, and I said, oh, that means you're going to let marketing program your mainframe. And he said, yeah. And I said, let me say that again slow. You're going to let marketing program your mainframe? And he turned absolutely white as a ghost. It was hilarious. I remember to the day. I was sitting across from him. White as a ghost. He said, oh, I see what you mean. So this problem is not new here. This problem of marketing and projection and all that, And so we started doing spreadsheets, and all of a sudden the Hudson Bay Company flew in with $5 billion retailer, and they said, we want you to build us a database. And And I said, okay, great. And so we threw 250 million records in a PC. Well, their IT department didn't like it because they had twin ES9000 mainframes. Those are the biggest mainframes that IBM made. And they couldn't figure anything out. They were just trying their best to process the orders. And so they called all our vendors. So we were working with Borland, we were working with Cognos, a bunch of people, and they asked them all one thing: can somebody build a database with 250 million transactions on a PC? And every one of our vendors told them, no, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. So they flew us up to Ottawa, Canada, in the summer. It was beautiful. And we met at Cognos, and they said, and everybody came in and they said, we don't believe you can do this. So you got to prove that you can do it. And so we told them how we were going to do it. They said, oh, well, anybody can do that. But when we started, so they gave us the contract. We found out later that they had a rule: nobody with less than 25 employees. No, they couldn't hire a vendor with less than 25 employees, which we didn't have. And it turned out that they gave us the contract to deliberately try to put us out of business. Yeah, so this war has been going on between the projections and the reality for a long time. So let's talk about projections, and let's talk about some of this stuff. Okay, so here's the graph we saw probably Monday or Tuesday. Now, what's interesting about that graph is that it is just, this is 318, and this is like a 10-day graph with nothing, and then woohoo, right? And this must be New York, I'm guessing. But Seattle, interestingly, when they isolated Seattle, it had actually started to go down in terms of the now, not on this graph. This graph is cumulative. Cumulative will always go up. Why? Because even though the people here might have recovered or died, they still count in a cumulative graph, right? So it's always going to keep going up. Bad graph. Here's another graph. This is from the American Farm Bureau, and it shows commodity prices. Today I went back by the gas station, and it was $1.29 a gallon. All my cars are full. I'm going to go buy some gas just to say I did it at $1.29 a gallon. One thing we know for sure: this shutdown will kill the economy. And I'm pretty convinced that some people on the task force want the economy shut down all the way till the election. Is there an agenda there? I'm not saying the virus isn't real. I'm saying that there are people trying to use this situation for money and power. There's an old saying in politics: never let a good crisis go to waste. This is a good crisis. Okay, so then we saw the Chris Murray model. And this is from a few days ago, right? It's from last week. I love the uncertainty rate. Why is there this uncertainty rate? Well, this range of uncertainty. And this range is from 3,500 deaths a day, which will add up after a while, down to 1,000 deaths a day, which we haven't hit yet. Oh, yes, I think yesterday we hit it, finally. So we're in there somewhere. But Seattle, who was the start of it, if you remember, my niece is a professor out in Seattle, and she said the kids came back from China. A lot of kids there from China, mainland China, are studying in Seattle. And so my niece, that's where I get it, anecdotal. And I talked to my friend Dr. Dan, who's a doctor out there, and he said, this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, that things were really getting stretched. So Seattle was the start of it, but on the graph, on the press briefing, they're going down. So we're right at the edge. Plus, the New York Times yesterday had an article, or day before, that hydrochloroquine, they said, is effective. Period. It's effective. So forget everything you heard from the experts. Not from me. I told you 2-3 weeks ago. I told you mid-March that hydrochloroquine was gonna have an effect, and it infuriates me that they're saying, well, we need clinical trials. No, That's not the way it works in a crisis. You need to use it and then figure out why. That's the way science works. Science works on anomalies and observations. The observation is it works. Now let's use it. Then we'll come up with a hypothesis. Then we'll have experimentation. The experimentation is not for the heat of the battle. No, that's what a scientist, not even a scientist, that's what a bureaucrat would say. That's not what a general would say. Okay, and it's not even what a good scientist would say. Right? Let's get people out. Nobody's on respirators that's on hydrochloroquine from what I've heard, even if it's anecdotal and even if it's not true, even if it's not 100%, even if it's only 80%. You've just multiplied your respirators by 5, right? And Israel said they're sending 8 million doses. A company that makes the generics in the U.S. said they would have 50 million doses by mid-April. So there should be plenty of doses out there, and we should be using them. Okay, here's another graph of the projection. Now, what's the trouble? You saw those graphs of the cumulative going up, 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 up. Deceptive graph. How to lie with statistics. This is a better one. I like this one because this one is from earlier, I believe, and you cannot project a curve, a decay curve, on the basis of the first few days, especially in an anomalous situation. So we used to project list results like this, and we would ask, how far are we into the curve? And then we would project based on history, but at least we had history. The trouble is with seasonality and with changes, the curve changes. Okay, the curve changes by how often you mail. The curve changes by what you've done just before. If you have a big sale, all kinds of things change. The size of your book, the size of your piece, the cover, the headline. So rather than you trying to fit these curves, years ago I said that's an insane way to do it. What we should be doing is we should be looking at what percentage of the mailing and what percentage of the sales, not what percentage of the timeline. Timelines are very difficult. I worked with Victor Hsu down in St. Louis, and Victor was a professor of mathematics at Washington University, and he decided that he wasn't making enough money on teaching math at university. So he was from Taiwan, and he said, I had friends in Taiwan that were making new stuff all the time, always inventing stuff, junky stuff and whatever, and starting fads. So he said, I thought I'd start fads instead. And so he was driving to work one day at university, and he came up with the idea of the O-ring bracelet. This is not an O-ring bracelet, but that was kind of what they looked like. They were rubber, and Madonna had a whole armful of them by the time they caught on, and you could buy them in gas stations, you buy them anywhere. But he said, what we do, he showed me a whole warehouse full of dolls that you could slide your hand into and make them like a puppet, and they were really cute. He had a whole warehouse ceiling, floor to ceiling, just stacked up boxes of these things. He said, that's what we had left over. He said, but you should have seen how many we sold. And Victor was in prison, last I heard, for tax evasion. But he taught me something really interesting about projecting on curves. He said, the key is that you look for the inflection when the slope starts to decline. Okay? Not over the top, but just the, okay? We're seeing that in Seattle. We're seeing it in big time. Italy is over the hump. Italy admitted that 1/6 of their cases were labeled, only 1/6 of their cases were really COVID-19. They labeled anybody who died COVID-19, and so they could get more international aid. Makes sense. Rumors on Twitter. Florida hospital said we're labeling every death COVID-19 because we know we'll get more government money. I ran a telecenter for a few years, and in those days we tried to get key codes. I'm trying to tie this back to marketing, but I'm showing you some human behavior. We wanted to get the key codes. We wanted to find out what list the catalog was mailed from so we could allocate the attribution to which list. So, we were getting a good number is probably 40%, and we might not have been quite at that. And so I talked with the managers, and I said, we really need to encourage the telesales people to get better numbers. So they gave them some speeches, and it went up a couple percent. Nothing big. So then we decided let's incentivize the telesales professionals to have a key code on their order. Let's give them a little bonus, at the end of the week if they have a higher percentage of requests. Now, I had a monitoring system. I was in charge of the phone systems too. No, don't ask me why, but that was in the days when you had to program a phone system with a telex machine. It was pretty funny, but I did it. And you don't even know what a telex machine is. It's like a telegram, only you could pre-type a tape, and then you could make a call, and it would go like that, and it would type a letter based on that tape, so you didn't have to have a lot of long distance charges. And that's when I got into business, before fax machines. In the agency, we would give fax machines to clients just so we could do artwork proofs and stuff back and forth, because nobody had a fax machine. It's like, what good is it if you don't have anybody to send stuff to? Anyway, so I could monitor the calls, and I couldn't hear any more people asking for the key codes. But what I found was that the percentage went way up. Percentage went way up on our key code recovery. Now, when the list report came out, it turned out that our list analysis report was driven by an algorithm that the programmers had built that said, if they don't get a key code, then you can put in an unknown, and if it's an unknown key code, and there were a couple of them, then we'll allocate it to the most recent key code recovered. So, every now and then we get like 10 orders from a key code that was 2 years old. And what happened was, word got around the telecenter that they could hear, they would have a little notepad, and they would have 1 or 2 key codes on there that they would just use after they hung up. They would say, oh, I forgot, and they'd put it on there. So they were getting their bonuses, and they were coming up with fictional key codes. That's human nature. They get paid more, they're going to have codes on there. And what you've done is you've adulterated your data. Is that happening? You bet. How do I know? Because I know human nature. It doesn't have anything to do with statistics. It has to do with what's going on, right? What is going on? It happened in Italy. China had an interest in not reporting all the deaths. So it's probably happened in the opposite in China. They wanted us to think it was no big deal. So we have the fog of war. We have deliberate misinformation from the World Health Organization that masks aren't effective. But Japan and South Korea did not shut down their economies, but everybody got a mask. I think it's time to question the experts. I've made a living questioning experts. I beat experts in modeling all the time. Time to question projections when you're down here. Okay? That's not the answer. The answer is treatment, fast, broadly. Testing, sure. But there's also some evidence coming out that the tests are not for COVID-19, but they're for a variety of COVID viruses, including the common cold, maybe. Though we don't get everybody testing positive, but that would explain 80% with no real symptoms. Okay? So why they're not bothering to test those symptoms, because the tests aren't very conclusive. So let's get going on the treatment. Let's get the economy back. We know the economy shutting down is real. The rest of this stuff is projection. What did I teach you about data? All data is historical. No data will tell you the future. No data will tell you the future. The future is uncertain. It's always uncertain. Death is certain. You're going to have deaths. 200,000 deaths in America every month, no matter what. So, yes, 5,000 deaths is serious. That's where we're at yesterday. But it's not even a blip. Total deaths, it hasn't impacted at all. Stay healthy. Get out in the sun. Walk around. Fresh air is an antiviral. Sunshine builds vitamin D. Have a great day. If you know any legislator I would say there should be a hearing. Make it on Zoom, make it something. We need to have some hearings and say, when is this stop? When does this stop? We know you're crushing the economy. I'm John Miglosh. Have a great day. Like and share. I hope you do. Bye-bye.